I've saved my progress as PenToolEllipse.ai, found inside the O9 Pen Tool folder. And in just a moment, in the next exercise, in fact, we're going to return to the task of drawing the crocodile. And specifically, we're going to be creating those yellow lips using a combination of smooth points that we'll lay down with the pen tool. But before we actually try to accomplish something with this tool, I want to give you a sense for some of the rules of working with smooth points and more specifically control handles inside of Illustrator. So I'm going to press Control semicolon or Command semicolon on a Mac to hide the guidelines. And I want you to notice I've got the top anchor point in the ellipse selected. And you can see that the two control handles are absolutely symmetrical about that anchor point. In other words, each control handle is equidistant, not only opposite and in alignment with the anchor point, but also equidistant from that anchor point. Now, the alignment will continue. So long as the smooth point remains a smooth point, we will have an absolute alignment of those two control handles with the anchor point, so we still have the seesaw effect. However, the control handles don't have to be symmetrical. One can be much closer to the anchor point than the other. And that's perfectly okay, by the way. Now, in our case, I've created something of a flattening effect, which is not what I want, so I'd want to pull this control handle a little bit farther away. But you don't have to worry too much about keeping these guys in alignment with each other. Mostly what you're concerned about is the arc of any given segment. So you're mostly worried about the segment that you're working on, which, if you're dragging this control handle, is going to be the upper right segment. And the curvature of this segment is determined by this control handle and its opposite control handle. That is the control handle associated with the in point. So we've got an out point for any given segment and an in point as well. And so these control handles are working together in order to define the curvature of that segment. When you're working with a smooth point, as you drag any control handle, you're also affecting the opposite control handle at that given moment in time. So you're also affecting the opposite segment, and that's something you have to bear in mind as you work along. But you're most concerned with the segment in between these two anchor points as long as you're working with these two control handles. Just something to focus on. Now, one of the big rules, there's two big rules of working with control handles, and these are ancient rules that have really proved useful over time. One of them is called the 2/3 rule. And the idea is that together, this control handle, this guy right there, and then this control handle should take up about 2/3 of the length of the entire curving segment between the two anchor points. When I'm talking about 2/3, I'm saying the length of this lever and this lever combined would be approximately 2/3 of the length of the segment. And I should say, as with any rules, feel free to violate them as you become more familiar with them. These are just good things to keep in mind up front. But that doesn't necessarily mean that each one is 1/3. So in other words, one control handle could be very long and the other control handle could be quite short, like so, and you would still get a more or less smooth effect between those two anchor points. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we have a smooth effect over here. We'd have to make some adjustments to the next segment. And by the way, notice if I want to see the control handles for the next segment, I would click on that segment in order to select it, and then I would see those control handles and I could move them like so. Or here's something else you should bear in mind. You can drag that segment directly if you like. So notice I can drag that segment to change its curvature as long as it's a curved segment. Remember, if you drag a straight segment, you'll move it to a different location. If you drag a curved segment, you will change its curvature like so. And you can actually emphasize one control handle over the other control handle depending on which direction you drag. So yet another way to work. Anyway, we've got the 2/3 rule, so these two control handles working together. Feel free to violate that rule. If you move the control handles farther away from each other, you can get away with longer control handles if you like. And then the other rule, and this is a pretty hard and fast one. This one I am very reticent to violate. And that is that if a segment is going to curve, it needs two control handles. One at the out point and one at the in point. And you've got to have two. If you don't want any curvature, then you want 0 control handles. If you want some curvature, then you need 2 control handles. Because look what happens if you just have one. Let's say I grab this anchor point, it's currently selected, and I go up to the control panel up here. And notice I've got these convert options, and they allow me to switch between a corner point. Notice it says convert selected anchor points to corner, or a smooth point. So you can switch back and forth between the two. So if I click on corner, I'm going to get rid of the control handles that were associated with that smooth point. Now I have a corner point, no control handles whatsoever, and I now have a very limited ability to adjust the curvature of this segment. So it ends up curving nicely at first, but it ends up flattening out at the end. Now in this case, it actually looks pretty halfway decent, but you are limited in terms of your control. So that's, again, just another rule that's out there. I stick with it for what it's worth. You can vary from it if you want to, but the idea is either you have no control handles associated with the segment, in which case it's straight, or you have two control handles associated with the segment, in which case it curves and you have great control over that curvature. Now, if I want to change that point back to a smooth point, all I do is I go back up here to the Convert Selected Anchor Points to Smooth and click on it, and I now have a smooth point again. And incidentally, that can be a heck of a tool. Watch this. Let's say I decide to draw a rectangle. And you know what? I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I can get it by pressing the M key. And I'm going to press the backspace key a couple of times, or the delete key a couple of times on the Mac to get rid of that mutated ellipse shape right there. And I'll draw a rectangle like so. And now notice I've got 4 anchor points, each of which is a corner point in this shape. Now I can't see my conversion options. In order to see those anchor point options up in the control panel, at least one anchor point in the shape has to be deselected. So I'll switch back to the white arrow tool, and then I'll shift click on any one of those points like so. And now I can see those options. And I can go ahead and convert the 3 selected anchor points, the smooth points like so. And then I could go ahead and click on that final anchor point and convert it to a smooth point as well. And I have an old style TV screen. Just bang, right away like that. There are so many automated tricks that you can pull off with these tools. Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and press the backspace key a couple of times, the delete key a couple of times on the Mac. These are not tricks that I expect you to remember. I just want you to get a sense for the power of using Bezier curves inside of Illustrator. I'm going to switch back over to my ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw a perfect circle. So I'll press the Shift key as I'm drawing with the tool. In order to create a circle, notice it has 4 smooth points. I'm going to go ahead and double the number of points inside of the shape by going up to the Object menu, choosing the Path command, and choosing Add Anchor Points. And that automatically adds a new anchor point between any 2 existing anchor points inside the path. And if you loaded D keys, I've given you yet another keyboard shortcut, Control Alt / Command Option / on the Mac, because this is going to be a very useful tool for creating wacky effects. I'll go ahead and choose the command, and now we have 8 anchor points. Notice these new anchor points in the middle of each one of the arcs. And those are smooth points as well, by the way. And now let's say I don't want to select any of the anchor points. I just want to select the segments. I'll go up to the Select menu. I'll choose Object, and I'll choose Direction Handles. Direction Handles is one of Illustrator's name for control handles. Illustrator has a bunch of names that you can find inside of the program for control handles. But in this case, what it really means is the curved segments. So I'll go ahead and choose the command, and now that deselects all the anchor points. As you can see, we've just selected the segments now. And watch this. This is just absolutely wacky. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Scale tool, which I can get by pressing the S key. And I'll move my cursor up and to the right like so, and I'll begin dragging. While pressing the Shift key, I'm dragging down and to the left. And notice what I end up doing here. I'm scaling the segments independently of their points. So the points are staying exactly where they were. The anchor points are not moving. The segments are changing. I'm scaling the curvature of the segments. And as soon as I release, I end up with this wacky spirograph effect. And then I could go ahead and fill the shape as well if I wanted to. I'll go over here to the swatches panel. I'll change the fill color to yellow, like so. And let's say I don't want everything to be filled. I want to get more of a stained glass effect. I'll go up to the window menu, and I'll choose the Attributes command. And then I could switch to this option right there. Use the even-odd fill rule. This is an ancient PostScript fill rule that determines how various portions of a path are selected, whether the overlapping portions are filled or not. And by default, when you're using the non-zero winding fill rule, it's a little more complicated than this. But basically, you are filling the overlapping segments. When you select even-odd fill rule, you aren't filling the overlapping segments. And you end up getting this effect right there. And if I were to switch to the black arrow tool, click on the shape in order to select it. Notice all the anchor points are still where they ever were. We just have some absolutely radical control handles going on. I'll hide that attributes panel. I'll drag that shape so it partially covers the crocodile shape, and you can see that we are seeing through the holes to the shapes below. So again, the last portion of this exercise is not necessarily terribly practical information, but I want you to have a sense for the amazing power that's associated with smooth points and control handles here inside of Illustrator. In the next exercise, we're going to take all this theory and we're going to put it to practical use.